Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Hinata falls in love with Naruto during Chunin exams part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The sun shone brightly upon Konoha, in the country known as the Land of Fire. One of the main 5 elemental nations, and much like the other nations they contained one of their most proficient and deadly military weapons. Ninja. These ninja, or shinobi, were incredibly skilled people who could wield chakra in mass quantities. Capable of great destruction, but also great feats of healing and resurrection. Like many of them it all began in one single place, and that would be the Ninja Academy. These academies are located within the many hidden villages scattered throughout the continent. The most reputable of the village are as follows: the village hidden in the leaves, the village hidden in the sand, the village hidden in the mist, the village hidden in the clouds, and the village hidden in the stone. Now there are villages that train their own ninja outside of these villages, such as the village of sound, but in the end they only get promoted to Chunin when they partake in the Chunin exams generally held within one of the 5 main hidden villages. Now each of the hidden villages have one main leader over their shinobi within their control and they are known as Kage. They are the strongest within their villages, capable of feats practically beyond imagination. For many shinobi it is their dream to become a Kage in their lifetime. It is no different here in Konoha. Though some people have some rather unique ways of expressing this. Such as a certain up-and-coming shinobi. Naruto. A man's voice hollered in the distance, and it was followed shortly after by mischievous laughter. You got to go faster than that if you want to catch me. Naruto laughed, continued jumping around, dodging all the other shinobi trying to catch him. Quit running you little runt. Another shinobi yelled, jumped forward in attempt to catch the troublemaker. Why would I do that? Ha ha ha. Naruto continued to laugh as he jumped down to the ground and seemingly jumping back up into the air. Get back here Uzumaki. Another of the shinobi shouted and took off in the direction Naruto went. After a few moments, Naruto let down his arms with a fox grin on his face, chuckling, "Wait easy." With that he took off only to be grabbed by the scruff of his shirt and was turned around to come eye to eye with the big man himself, the Hokage. Oh, hey there Gramps. Naruto gave a mock salute with his grin ever present, but it was quite obvious that he was sweating bullets. Hey there indeed Naruto. The Hokage, also known as Hiruzen Sarutobi, responded with a smile. I hope that you'll entertain me with a meeting in my office. Actually Gramps, I actually need to get to school and learn and stuff, hehe. Naruto chuckled nervously. Nonsense my boy, I wish to have a nice long chat with you. I'm sure I can give a pass or something of the sort. After all I am the head of the school. Hiruzen said with a smile, besides I wasn't giving you a choice in the matter. With a snap of his fingers a black-clothed shinobi with a mask that resembled a cat appeared next to him. This was one of his personal guard from the Anbu. Take him to my office, and keep him there. With a nod the Anbu took Naruto and disappeared in swirl of leaves. Hiruzen let out a sigh, and began his walk back to the Hokage tower. As he walked he would take occasional glances up at the Hokage monument within the village. In total there were 4 faces upon the monument and each of them were the previous Hokages that had served Konoha in the past. His face was among them, the third one to be specific. He was the 3rd Hokage, but due to unfortunate circumstances 7 years ago he was also now the 5th Hokage. Though instead of reminiscing he was trying to figure out how on earth he was going to get them cleaned. Naruto Uzumaki has done yet another one of his famous pranks, but it seemed today he was really pulling out the stops with this one. Every single face had paint upon them from doodles to mustaches. He thought he looked rather good with one, to be honest. He let out a sigh. Oh Minato, how I wish you were here. With a shake of his head walked into the Hokage building and made his way up to his office. Though before he entered he noticed a familiar blonde in the hallway. Inoichi-san, to what do I owe the pleasure? The said blonde, was indeed Inoichi Yamanaka. The man gave a small smile. Nothing to pressing Hokage-sama, as I'm sure you're busy with young Naruto. Hiruzen waved it off. I can spare a few moments, what can I do for you? Inoichi looked around for a moment before he spoke. Well, it is about Naruto. Hiruzen rose an eyebrow, but gestured for him to continue. I was curious if you would allow me to speak to him. I've seen his most current prank, and well, I know he will get nothing but ridicule. Hiruzen nodded grimly. He was all too aware of how the boy was treated. All because he was jailer of the feared Kyuubi no Kitsune. Unbeknownst to Naruto, that is. He doesn't know the reason as to why he is hated, ignored, and sometimes beaten. He doesn't even know who his true parents are. In which case would be the late Yondaime Hokage or Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. The only reason he does said pranks because it is the only way to get any kind of attention. He wants to exist, and so the best way for him is to do pranks. So why would you like to speak to him, Inoichi-san? Hiruzen questioned in a serious tone. Well, to be honest, sir, to knock some sense into him. Inoichi stated bluntly. I know he will have plenty of potential as a shinobi, but if he doesn't get his act together soon, well, I don't know what could happen. Hiruzen was staring at the man at the moment with a blank face, but internally he was genuinely surprised. How will you go about this? He is a very stubborn boy. Much like his mother. Hiruzen muttered the last part, which brought a faint smile to Inoichi's lips. I have a few ideas in mind, but I think one of the first things would be to give him some friends, and the resources to actually lead a somewhat normal life. Hiruzen was once again surprised and rose an eyebrow in curiosity. You can't just force someone who doesn't want to be friends with the boy. Hiruzen stated. I also know the boy does not like to be pitied. He can't stand it. Inoichi chuckled. My daughter would, by no means, mind to be his friend. Then there are also the Nara and Akamichi clans who have nothing against the boy. They respect the Yondaime's dying wish as much as you do. Besides Hokage-sama, we both know you can't play favorites anymore due to the boy being in the ninja academy. He finished and waited until Hiruzen started chuckling. Nothing pressing. My old back, Inoichi-san. Hiruzen continued to chuckle. Well, I have no quarrels with you doing so. You do not need my permission for this, but I appreciate you running it by me. Hiruzen let out a content sigh. I wish you luck, but first things first. He had a playful smirk on his face. I have to handle said person's punishment. Inoichi merely gave a chuckle. I'll be waiting at the monument then. Better to do it when he's working so he can't run off. Hiruzen merely nodded, watched as Inoichi walked off with his hands in his pockets. Maybe there is indeed hope for this village, and for Naruto. Hiruzen chuckled and walked into the room with Naruto hanging upside down, tied up and facing the Hokage's seat. About time you showed up, Gramps. Naruto stated, but it seemed a bit off. I'm starting to get dizzy. Sure enough, when he was turned around, his face was red from the blood rushing to it. See, can I come down now? Naruto asked while trying not to look distressed. Hiruzen chuckled and waved his hand, and the rope was cut, letting gravity do its handiwork. Naruto landed on the floor with his eyes swirling, as the blood worked its way back throughout his body. Feeling better, Naruto? Naruto merely stated as he was trying to get his limbs to work. That's good. Hiruzen stated as he sat down in his Hokage chair, because as for your punishment, you'll be cleaning all the paint off the monument. Wait, what? Naruto yelled as his punishment was delivered to him without any sympathy at all. Hokage monument. Stupid Oji-san. Naruto muttered as he scrubbed away on the Hokage monument. Despite everything, he was actually finishing up on the second face of the monument about midday. Though he was putting the minimum amount of effort into doing it. This much could be picked up by Inoichi Yamanaka. As he had asked to be put on observance of the boy, he thought it better to wait till he was more close to being done. I know I said I would knock sense into the boy, but where do I even begin? Inoichi thought to himself. Oi ponytail. Naruto called out, and a tick mark came across Inoichi's face. What do you need, Gaki? Inoichi responded with a slight smirk. I'm ready to go to the other face. Naruto stated, pocketing his cleaning cloth and began pulling up himself up the monument. Inoichi nodded. Good job, almost there, Gaki. Whatever. Naruto huffed, and began gathering his supplies. I wonder if Ichiraku's will be open when I'm done. Like that, a light bulb went off in Inoichi's head. If he could talk to Naruto over his favorite meal, and in his most comfortable environment no less. Nodding in approval, he decided to wait a bit longer before revealing his intentions to the boy. It was beginning to be into the early evening as Naruto was halfway done with the fourth face when Inoichi spoke. So Gaki. What do you want, ponytail? Naruto stated as he stopped from his cleaning. He clenched his jaw, but relaxed it as he began talking. So I want to talk to you after you're done doing this. Naruto's eyes narrowed and scoffed. No thank you, ponytail. I'm not interested. You probably only want to berate me or just yell at me. Inoichi raised an eyebrow at that. Well, that's just great. The villagers really put him a dark hole, didn't they? Of course I'm not covering any shinobi either. He let out a sigh and gave a mock shrug. Fine, I was going to buy you some ramen, but I mean if you don't want to talk then fine by me. Naruto's eyes widened, but then quickly became suspicious. What you going to talk to me about? Wow, he managed to hold back his love for ramen. There's a shell shocker. Inoichi stared at Naruto for a moment. To tell you the truth, Gaki, about your future as a shinobi, as a person, and the man the Yondaime Hokage wanted you to be. Naruto's eyes widened when he realized he was serious. Alright. Just wait, I'll have this last bit finished before you know it. Believe it. As he was shouting, he was jumping up and down in excitement, and as he finished to start washing again there was an audible snap as a rope gave way and the next thing Naruto saw was the trees in his cleaning bucket falling down. He looked up to see a stone-faced Inoichi grabbing the back on his black shirt. Well, that close there wasn't it, Gaki? Inoichi stated as he wrapped an arm around the boy and began walking up the monument. How are you doing that? Naruto asked curiously as he tried to shake off the fact he almost met a very painful death. Oh, this? Inoichi asked as they reached the top, something that all ninja need to learn, of course. I'm simply putting chakra into my feet to cling the monument. Inoichi finished lecturing and placed Naruto down. Didn't the academy teach you that? I mean, I know you just started, but I would have thought they would have covered that. Naruto shrugged. I've stopped paying attention. Inoichi brought a hand up to face to pinch the bridge of his nose. Naruto immediately got defensive. Oi. It's not like I do it on purpose. The teachers ignored my questions, and refused to help for whatever reason. So I stopped putting the effort in. Besides, how am I supposed to know if I'm doing it right when I don't get told anything? Inoichi felt as though he had been stabbed. They're purposefully ruining his education. This is just ridiculous. Inoichi let out a sigh. I'm sorry to hear that, Gaki. I'll be sure to bring this up when we talk into the Hokage as well. That needs to be addressed, but in the meantime I'll fix your lift and you can get back to work. Naruto groaned, and Inoichi smirked. What? Hey, just because that happened doesn't mean you get out of your punishment. Naruto let out a sigh. Just hurry and fix it so I mean, we can get some ramen. Ichiraku's ramen stand. Ah, now that's the stuff. Naruto slurped up more noodles and let out a content sigh from the bowl in front of him. Inoichi had a small smile on his face. You get 3 free bowls, Gaki, that's it, the rest is on you. Alright. Naruto cheered, and continued to savor his favorite dish of all time. They had finished about an hour ago with Naruto literally kicking it up a notch. It was hard to believe that he was really only 7 years of age, especially with his talent for putting his mind to the task on hand. Though the real surprise was this boy's appetite, it felt as though it could rival that of Akamichi. After Naruto finished with his third bowl he ordered one more, and paid for it up front and counted the money he had left. One more is all I can afford. He muttered and then shrugged. Inoichi cleared his throat to get Naruto's attention. Alright, so time for the real reason I took you here. He waited a moment to ensure that Naruto was still staying attention. Okay Gaki, let's get one thing clear, and that is I'm not like the rest of these pompous villagers. Naruto was surprised that he actually didn't notice the bowl of steaming ramen was set in front of him by Ayame, so now that we got that clear, I want to make it blatantly obvious as that I'm going to help you. You'll what? Naruto spoke just barely above a whisper, his eyes wide. I said I'm going to help you, and I won't be the only one either. Inoichi stated as he faced Naruto, you have a lot, and I do mean a lot, of potential. If no one can see that, well, they're about as blind as a bat. Inoichi gave a warm smile to Naruto. I want to help you get started. The Yondaime wanted you to be seen as a hero, Naruto, and I plan on helping you with that. After all I've heard of your dream, and I honestly believe you can do it. Inoichi noticed Naruto's eyes began to get misty. Now, with that being said, you have to be willing to put in some hard work. That means focusing on your studies. Now, starting next week, I'll be picking you up at your school with my daughter so I can help. I know much more than those excuses of an academy staff. Naruto couldn't speak. He could hardly breathe. When he finally managed to get a breath, he finally spoke. Why, you mean it? Why, you'll train me, you'll help me, and not look down on me. Inoichi smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. Damn straight, Gaki. Now go get some sleep, you deserved it. We can talk more tomorrow. Besides, I have someone I want to introduce to you. As Inoichi stood up and turned to face Naruto, he felt himself semi-tackled and two pairs of arms wrapped around him. He looked down to see Naruto hugging him. Thank you. Naruto's muffled voice came through. Thank you so much. I promise to do the best that I can. Naruto looked up at Inoichi with a smile. I never go back on my promises. Inoichi rose an eyebrow and rubbed Naruto's hair. You're welcome, Gaki. Now get going. He jerked his thumb away from the building, and Naruto, with a big smile, ran out of the food stand. He let out a sigh, but still had a smile on his face. He felt a tap on his shoulder to find the owner of the stand, Tuki, with a ladle in his hand. Take care of Naruto, the boy has had it rough. Tuki stated and looked in the direction Naruto took off. It's good to know there are people out there who truly can look past the surface. Inoichi shared a smile with Tuki. I'll treat the boy as if he were my own son. With that, he set off for home. Yet he felt something nagging at the back of his mind, and so going on a whim he went in the direction young Naruto took. Somewhere in Konoha, Naruto was running, but not from joy that he was feeling minutes ago. As of now, he was running in fear. He took his normal route home, but due to the later hours it meant some early drunks were going to begin their walk back home. Why they are so angry with me? I didn't do anything to them. Naruto thought as he ran through the streets trying to get to his apartment. This hasn't been the first time this has happened either. There were numerous occasions when this happened when he wasn't careful when he walked home in the late hours of the day. He didn't know why people hated him so much, or even why people lashed out at him when he wanted nothing more than to purchase food. Though right now he would take those hateful glares over this. Drunks were always the worst. They hurt him. Sometimes he's woken up in the hospital from the beatings they dealt. Yet oddly enough he wouldn't see them again. Though there were always drunks, and they always hurt him. He didn't see why this would be any different, that is until a kunai flew right by his head. Naruto's eyes bulged from his head. They're actually trying to kill me. Naruto beelined into an alleyway and used it to propel himself up to the roof with the now known drunken shinobi behind him. Why does my luck suck like this? What did I do to deserve this? Tears stung his eyes as he continued maneuvering around in attempt to lose the shinobi. When his apartment came into view, he felt a surge of hope go through him. If he could get them in the building, he could use the traps he set to get free. At least that was the plan when before a kunai snagged the back of his shirt and pinned him up against a wall in the alley closest to his apartment. When he opened his eyes to his horror, he was dangling above the ground facing the two drunk shinobi, and he could do nothing but whimper, "Ah, ish," the demon brat crying. One of the slurred, "Shto bad no one cares. You'll pay for every shingudish for uthing demon." The other slurred as well and pulled a kunai out of his pouch, while the other pulled back a fist and struck Naruto. The blow hit Naruto in the face, and resulted on his hitting his head on the wall behind him. When he opened his eyes, tears falling, but his eyes were no longer their beautiful blue, they were blood red and had a black slit down the middle. He was angry, but he was sadder as he spoke. "What did I ever do to you? I don't even know you." The two men chuckled. "Thash even worse. You don't even remember your crimes." He pulled back his fist again and gave a solid punch against the boy's forehead, causing him to whiplash into the wall, sending him into the realm of unconsciousness. "Shto bad, I wanted to hear him cry some more." The shinobi chuckled and pulled back his kunai. "Oh well, they'll thank me when ease." A cold voice spoke from behind. "Mind prison." Both bodies of the shinobi shivered and collapsed to the ground, and revealed an infuriated Inoichi, and they call themselves shinobi. He spat on the ground. "I know you're there, Anbu, so come on out." Sure enough, an Anbu with a boar on it appeared by his side. "I'll be taking Naruto to the hospital. I suggest you take care of these two excuses for shinobi and report to the Hokage. I'll be checking up with him, so rest assured that if you don't, it'll be your job." He glared at Anbu, who merely nodded, but he could tell that he was ticked at him. With that, a sorrowful look came over his features, and he unattached Naruto from the wall and began roof hopping to the hospital. All things considered, the boy wasn't too badly hurt, but that didn't excuse anything that happened tonight. When he finally made it to the hospital, he was hit with the smell antiseptic, and a hint of blood. He made his way over to the counter, and after a few heated arguments with some of the medical staff, had secured a room for Naruto. After getting him into the room, and getting a proper checkup, he was informed he would be fine by the morning. Soon after, the nurse left and Anbu came in through the window, and it was thankfully one he knew he could trust. The said Anbu had a mask of a cat, and it had been multiple times that she had been there for Naruto. Rubbing his brow, looking at Naruto sorrowfully, "Well, I'll leave you to him. I need to check up with the Hokage, and then I'm going to bed. I haven't been out this late since my T&I career." He received a nod from the Anbu and he then took his exit out the window. Inside Naruto's mindscape, Naruto's eyes fluttered open, and at that moment several things registered in his mind. He was laying down in water, there were pipes everywhere, and finally he didn't recognize this place at all. Where am I? So the brat finally awakens. A voice boomed throughout the room, startling poor Naruto. Who's there? Naruto shouted out. "Turn around, brat, and maybe you'll see." The voice sounded once again through the room. Surely enough, Naruto turned around slowly, and first saw a large gate in front of him, but what scared him to his core was the gigantic, orange fox. Why you're the Nine Tails grinned wickedly. "Yes, I am indeed the Nine Tails. The most powerful of the Biju and known as the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Why are you here?" Naruto stuttered out. "Did I die?" The Kyuubi scoffed. "As if I'll let a minor concussion end my container. Perish the thought. No, brat, you did not die, and to answer your first question, I was sealed into you." "Sealed into me?" Naruto questioned, now confused, but the more he thought about it, the more it seemed to make sense. The villagers calling him demon brat, demon runt. It was because of me. Naruto looked up at the Kyuubi with wide eyes that held some anger, but what caught him by surprise was the look of sorrow on the Kyuubi's face. "Don't look at me like that, brat. Despite my past may make me seem like a terrible menace, which I won't deny, I am much more than that. Why should I believe you?" Naruto yelled at the Kyuubi. "You destroyed a good part of the village, killed hundreds of good shinobi. That may have been me, but it was not me that wanted to do such a thing. Kyuubi shook his head minimally. That night was a terrible night for everyone that was present. That included my previous container and your Yondaime Hokage. I may be the embodiment of destruction and chaos, but does not mean that I do so needlessly. Though you should ask yourself, why would I, destruction incarnate, decide to destroy a village out of nowhere with no possible gain? I may be seen as a demon, but I still have a will and moral compass of my own. Naruto was silent for a few moments before he spoke again. I still find it hard to believe you. I've gone through too much because of you. The Kyuubi let out a sigh. I suppose the better way to explain that would be to show you. The Kyuubi closed his eyes, and slowly his form began to shrink down. Soon there was nothing but one man standing behind the gates that contained him. He wore black dress slacks, an orange long-sleeve dress shirt, rectangular wire frame glasses and spiky orange hair. When he talked again it wasn't as loud, but it was still deep, there that should be more appropriate to hold this conversation. He examined himself, and then back at the awestruck Naruto. Come over here, brat. Naruto shook his head and his eyes held suspicion. Why should I? Because I can't show you with you all the way over there. The Kyuubi let out a sigh. I can't do anything to you because of this seal, brat. Now get over here so I can show you the truth, and then maybe you and I can work out a deal. Naruto, still ever hesitant, rose from the ground and looked at the now human Kyuubi. Looking for any hints of deceit or trickery. The Kyuubi was doing nothing more than holding out his hand formed into a fist. Naruto walked slowly over to the prison gates and stopped a few feet away from the Kyuubi's fist. Naruto looked at the fist and then up at the Kyuubi. He motioned with his head at his fist and the hand at Naruto's side. Naruto balled his hand into a fist and slowly raised to meet the Kyuubi's own fist. When his fist made contact, a single bell chime was heard and Naruto's eyes glazed over. He began to fall backwards, but the Kyuubi caught his arm and rested him up against one of the cage bars. Took your sweet time, brat. The Kyuubi scoffed, but there was a slight smile on his face. We're going to go places, brat, greater than you can ever imagine. The Kyuubi crouched down, and rested his back against the same cage bar Naruto was leaning against. Well, let's see how you deal with that information first. Naruto let out a gasp as he jerked straight up from his sitting position. When he looked around, he was still in the cellar location he was in before, which meant, this isn't a dream, Naruto. What you saw was also the real event that took place 7 years ago, on the day of your birth. The Kyuubi stated from right behind him. Naruto looked behind him and sure enough there was the Kyuubi leaning right against the same cage bar he was, with his head turned just enough for one eye to look at Naruto. When this registered with Naruto, then began to feel tears begin to well up in his eyes. So that means my parents were. The Kyuubi nodded with a slight look of sadness and remorse in his eyes. Your mother Kushina Uzumaki, my previous container, and your father also the Yondaime Hokage, and known as the Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze. Naruto turned his back around, and rested it against the bar, and felt tears run down his face, but yet he had a small smile on his face. They did love me. They didn't abandon me. The images of his parents were all there. The vision had showed the whole day and what had transpired. His parents were happy, and excited for the big day. Then that fight had transpired and everything went to hell, but yet his father had done everything in his power to do what he had to do, and that meant sacrificing his life. Then there were the last moments of his mother and father. They were impaled by the Kyuubi's claw, but yet the Kyuubi's eyes were glazed over with something else covering his iris. Their last words sounded through his mind, before he watched the seal and the Shinigami do their work. It felt like a fantasy, but it also felt so real, like he was there. Kyuubi's eyes widened a little. Through all that negativity, he still found the positives. He felt a slight smirk tug on his lips. Naruto wiped the tears from his face, and looked over at the Kyuubi and bowed his head. I'm sorry. Now Kyuubi's eyes did widened at that. I can see what you mean when you said you were not in control. After that, a moment of silence followed soon thereafter until Naruto broke it again. Did you get along with my mother? Kyuubi chuckled a little. I would see it as more of his mutual understanding than anything else. Your mother was quite stubborn in many ways, and so we tended to butt heads more often than not. Though she was far better than my first container. Naruto chuckled as well, hearing how stubborn she was with an entity far stronger than she. Well, I may be just as stubborn as she was, but I hope that I can get along with you. Oh, the Kyuubi rose an eyebrow. You seem awfully willing to go along with this. Naruto looked at the Kyuubi. I want to be strong, and live up to my parents' expectations. Then Naruto got a mischievous smirk on his face. Besides, I doubt you want to have a weak container. Kyuubi's eyes looked shocked, but soon turned into a mischievous smirk. Well, brat, I can see this is going to be quite right. Naruto gave a big grin to the Kyuubi. So I guess that comes to our little agreement now, doesn't it? Naruto looked at the Kyuubi, signaling him to continue. Alright, first things first, I want access to your senses. I've only been able to catch glimpses and it is quite annoying. Next, when you're training, you'll be doing it my way. You'll still train the other ways at that excuse of an academy of yours, but I know plenty more than they do. Besides, who else will train you in being one with your Biju? Now finally, you have to start eating something else besides that infernal ramen. Naruto looked appalled. But ramen is the food of the gods. Of all the things. The Kyuubi shook his head exasperatedly. I'm not saying you have to stop eating it, brat. I'm saying you'll have to eat something else besides ramen. If you keep up your current diet, you won't be nothing but the size of a runt. Naruto crossed his arms in a mock pout, but after a moment he eyed the Kyuubi before nodding his head. Fine. I, Naruto Uzumaki, accept your terms. And held out his fist. The Kyuubi smirked and tapped his own fist against Naruto's, and I, Kurama Kyuubi no Kitsune, accept the following terms. Another chime sounded throughout the hall, and with that the gates slowly opened around them, and the landscape around them changed. All around were rolling plains. There were trees and mountains in the distance, yet was really surprising was there was actually a cottage nearby. It was pretty standard, but it was felt quite homey if one were to go inside. Whoa! Naruto looked around wide-eyed while Kurama examined his surroundings. What just happened? Kurama grinned at the sight. We formed a bond that can't be broken, brat. This will be an excellent place to train your mind. He looked back at Naruto before looking up at the sky. Well, it looks like you're awakening. You seem to have a few visitors. I'll be keeping in touch, brat. But how will I get back to you? Naruto questioned as he felt himself fading from the realm. Kurama grinned. I'll tell you later, brat. Remember, since our pact, I'll be able to keep contact with you. Now get going. I got some exploring to do. Naruto nodded as his began to further fade into nothing. Okay. See Akura. Before he could finish his name, he vanished from his mindscape, leaving an amused Kurama to scout out his new broadened home. Konoha Hospital. Naruto's eyes fluttered opened and was blinded by light. Gah. Stupid son. The two other men in the room jerked their heads to Naruto, and let out a breath of relief to see him awake. After reporting to the Hokage about the attack, Inoichi had not left Naruto's side, and the Hokage had come in early that morning to check up on him as well. It pained Hiruzen much to see the boy like this, like many other times. Ah, Naruto-kun, I am glad to see you are awake. Hiruzen said calmly to get Naruto's attention. After Naruto's eyes finally adjusted to the light, he finally addressed his visitors with a smile. Oji-san and Ponytail. Inoichi grumbled, and Hiruzen chuckled and gave the boy a nod. I see you're still giving your nicknames. Naruto gave his famous grin. Of course. I wouldn't be Naruto Uzumaki, I mean Naruto Namikaze, if I didn't. In that short moment the temperature dropped, and a shocked Inoichi spoke. What do you mean, Naruto? You're Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto looked confused, but my father was Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage. Now an even more shocked Hiruzen spoke. How do you know that? Both of the adults looked at him expectantly, and Naruto felt ultimately scared until a familiar voice spoke in his head, well, go ahead and tell them, brat. No sense in delaying inevitable. Naruto jumped at the sudden intrusion of Kurama's voice in his mind, but he instead to his word and spoke, the fox told me. Hiruzen paled at the thought, what to you? Naruto found his voice more, the nine tails told me, well, more like showed my mother and father's last day in moments, October 10th. Hiruzen sat back in the chair he was sitting in while Inoichi just stood there dumbfounded. Hiruzen's mind was running wild, but his first concern was the boy. It didn't do anything to you, did it? Naruto shook his head, he's actually not that bad really. This led to shock of the men before him. I found out that he was under something called a genjutsu. Naruto shrugged and continued, that entire night was caused by one man, and yet he doesn't even know who, but he knows it was an Uchiha and an older one at that. Hiruzen sat straight up in his chair. Are you sure about this? He asked sternly, catching Naruto off guard. Why, yeah. His eyes were glazed over in the memory, and I saw that red and black thing that the Uchihas had when they were angry, before they were Yeah. Naruto finished scratching the back of his head. He remembered the day after that event quite well. For some reason the villagers blamed him for it, but now he could see why, but it wasn't true. Hiruzen let out a sigh, before sitting back in his chair again, feeling a headache coming. Well, if that is to be believed, then there is nothing we can really do now, since now there is only one remaining, and I severely doubt he was behind it. Then he looked at Naruto for a moment. I am skeptical, Naruto-kun, are you sure you can trust him? Sorry. Hiruzen tilted his head in confusion. He's not an it. He's a male. Naruto stated matter of fact. He doesn't like to be referred as an it. I see. Hiruzen said as rethought his question. Can you trust him, Naruto-kun? Naruto looked down at his hands for a moment, before looking up at Hiruzen with a small smile. Well, he may be the reason the village hates me for it, but in his own he apologized to me. He let me know the question I wanted know the answer for so long. Hiruzen felt his heart squeeze with guilt. What better way to find out that my idol was indeed my father? With a bigger smile he said, he even said he would train me. He's given me more than most villagers. Inoichi looked a bit down about that, but Naruto quickly spoke up, but I'll still take your offer, Ponytail. I'm going to need all the help I can get. After all, he can only teach me so much after all. Both Hiruzen and Inoichi were shocked with Naruto's honesty. Most would think he would be furious with both the fox and his parents, but yet here he was smiling. Though it was obvious there was still hurt behind his eyes, and then there was the problem with the villagers. Even still he chose to smile, and took the good that could be found in the bad. In Hiruzen's mind, this would make Minato more than proud of his son. Well, be that as it be, Naruto-kun, I will be having a student of mine checking on the seal sometime in the future just for security reasons. Hiruzen stated after a moment of letting Naruto's words sinking in. Naruto nodded. That sounds reasonable, and he agrees as well. Hiruzen rose an eyebrow. He's fine with being in his jail cell, so to speak. Naruto was quiet for a moment before he spoke. He doesn't really consider a jail cell, as you put it, but more like a personal challenge. He does miss his freedom, but I think anyone would. Hiruzen nodded. Inoichi even found himself nodding. I'm still kind of surprised. For another moment Naruto was quite, well, he finds that it is far more enjoyable to actually cooperate than to resist, even make its own existence miserable. At first Hiruzen was willing to ignore, but the second time Naruto hesitated in answering he had to sat his growing curiosity. Naruto-kun, are you communicating with it right now? Naruto nodded his head. We made a pact with each other for his power and training. He has access to my senses, and, Naruto made a gulping sound before a stream of tears flooded down his face, limit my ramen intake. Both men in the room hung their heads at the reasoning behind it all, before Hiruzen spoke once more. Well, if that is all that pact had entailed, I don't see much harm in that. So what do you plan on doing now, Naruto-kun? Naruto pondered that for a moment before looking down. I don't really know. I mean, I'm willing to take on Inoichi's offer, but with what happened last night. Naruto wrapped his arms around his chest. I don't know if I can go back there. Inoichi looked at Naruto for a moment, before turning to Hiruzen. Hokage-sama, I may have an offer you may be willing to listen to. Pray tell. Hiruzen replied with a risen eyebrow. Next door to my house is a ranch-style housing unit. Inoichi stated, it's up for rent or sale, and if the Gaki here is willing to work a bit at our little shop, I don't mind paying for about half of his house payment. Naruto shook his head. I wouldn't even have enough funds to cover the other half of the house ponytail. I can't possibly do that. Inoichi rose an eyebrow at Naruto before facing Hiruzen again. I'm sure since the boy has found out his heritage he's entitled to a little bit of compensation, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen's face went from curious to amused in an instant. I'm sure that I can give him one of his saving bonds without trouble. Naruto's eyes widened, and Hiruzen turned to face him. Unfortunately, that is all I can give you, Naruto-kun. During the brief encounter with you father I had, he was rather adamant about you being able to protect yourself or be the rank of Chunin before you were even supposed to know of your heritage, but now as it stands this is it, before I can give you any more of your heritage. That is except for one thing, as this was from your mother. Naruto cocked his head to the side, an Uzumaki clan scroll. You may very well have their bloodline, Naruto-kun, besides longevity and possible fuinjutsu adaptation. They're known as chakra chains. I'll expect you to stop by some day to pick it up so you can study your clan's ways. Unfortunately, you'll be forced to learn those on your own, as there are no other Uzumakis known. Naruto nodded slowly, still in somewhat of a daze, before he asked, what should I do about my name? Hiruzen let out a sigh. I'm afraid you'll have to remain an Uzumaki. Even if certain events did not take place, you would have been Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto cocked his head to the side, confused. As you know, Naruto-kun, the Yondaime single-handedly defeated the Iowa nation's shinobi forces. You can probably see that he had gained a lot of enemies, and so for the safety of his family his marriage remained unknown. Now when you turn Chunin it will be publicly announced, as at that time Minato stated that you would be strong enough to defend yourself. I hope that is reason enough, Naruto-kun. After a moment Naruto gave a smile. Well, I have my father's looks, and that's enough for me. I'm more than happy to keep my mother's name. He scratched the back his head. I know this sounds bad, but I'm pretty sure those drunks did me a favor, huh? It would seem so. Hiruzen let out a sigh. Well, I got paperwork to do, and I have to go get your savings bond ready. He looked over at Inoichi. Inoichi-san, I would suggest getting a hold of the real estate agency and tell them that the property is bought. Inoichi nodded. Stop by this afternoon and I should have everything ready for you. Then he shifted his gaze over to Naruto. Naruto-kun, this the most I can do for you at this time. You'll still get your stipend, but from that point on it is all up to you to spend the money you will be given. Naruto felt like he was going to cry, but he didn't. He kept them at bay, and nodded with the biggest smile he could manage. Inoichi smiled along with Hiruzen before he spoke. Alright Gaki, if that's the case then when we get your home finalized I guess my wife and I will be giving you accounting lessons. Naruto nodded again with the smile on his face. Then after a moment something dawned on him. What will I do about furniture or appliances? They all came with the apartment, I can't take them with me. Inoichi chuckled. Well, I guess I should also mention that house came fully furnished. So that ought to save you a pretty yen or two. Anything else? Well, there is the clothes problem, those look a bit worn down. Then Inoichi got an evil smile on his face. I believe I'll leave that to my dear wife and daughter. Naruto tilted his head to the side in confusion, while Hiruzen looked at Inoichi warily. I feel sorry for you, Naruto-kun. Inoichi-san, you are quite dangerous. Hiruzen cleared his throat. Well, now that everything is taken care of, I have paperwork to do. Hiruzen stood up and popped his back with a relieved sigh. I'll see you both this afternoon. With that, he walked out, before giving one last detail. Oh, before I forget, Naruto-kun, I'll take care of the closing deal on your apartment so you can focus on your tour, I mean shopping trip. Naruto nodded with a smile, and threw off the covers, jumping into his worn sandals. Let's go, Ponytail. Inoichi grumbled at his nickname but nevertheless smiled. Alright, Gaki, first things first, get that house reserved, and then check out the property. With another nod from Naruto, the two made their way out back into Konoha. The streets were bustling with activity as it was every day in Konoha. Merchants were selling their wares to civilian and shinobi alike. Gossip was flying around about the latest trends, ninja exploits, and personal affairs. Though, like every day when a certain blonde walked through the streets, glares filled the eyes of the ones that knew of his little secret but were forbidden to even to mention it. It sickened Inoichi to no end, but when he looked down at Naruto, he had the biggest smile on his face. Even some people couldn't bring themselves to glare at the boy. Inoichi merely smirked and continued walking to the Yamanaka clan compound, where he was sure Naruto would get quite the welcome. Yamanaka clan compound. Here we are, Gaki. Welcome to the Yamanaka compound. Inoichi said with a grin. Naruto looked around with curious eyes. It's different than I expected. Inoichi chuckled. What did you think, we would have walls surrounding us? Naruto nodded, and Inoichi scoffed. We're not like most clans being stuck up and such, our clan encourages social interaction. As they continued through the clan grounds, Naruto noticed they were smiling and waving to him. Ponytail, I have a question. Inoichi grumbled. What is it, Gaki? Do they know who I am? Or at least know what's inside of me? Naruto looked down at the ground and stopped walking, making Inoichi turn around and look at him. Well, of course they do, Gaki. Though if the reactions you're getting are any clue, is that our clan doesn't really care, but I guess a better way to put it is we can see what you are, and not what the villagers make you out to be. Inoichi stated, looking at Naruto. Naruto was genuinely surprised. Really? Inoichi rose an eyebrow, and nodded. Have I lied to you before, Gaki? Naruto thought for a moment, and shook his head. No, I guess not. Then he put on a smile. Well, what we waiting for? I got a house to buy. Inoichi smirked and rubbed Naruto's hair and turned around, walking off, leaving a grumbling Naruto trying to fix the mess that is his hair. After another few minutes of walking, they arrived at the real estate agency for the compound. It wasn't long before they were in intense negotiations. Naruto, who would normally ignore these types of things, was actually paying close attention. He would probably need to learn how to do things like this as he grew older. When all was said and done, they managed to get a rather fair deal on the house, and Inoichi, as he said, paid for half of the housing, and the rest would be here by the afternoon. Shortly after they left the office, they found themselves right in front of the said property they had just bought. Like Inoichi said, it was a ranch-style housing unit, 2-bedroom, 1 office, 1.5 bathrooms, including a small storage unit, with a rather large backyard. To Naruto, though, it looked like a mansion. After looking at from the outside, Inoichi stepped forward with the key in hand, but instead tossed it over to Naruto. Here, Gaki, it's your place, you do the honors. Inoichi had a smile on his face at Naruto's still dumbfounded look. Naruto looked at the key, then at Inoichi. Really? Inoichi nodded, then gestured to the door. Naruto walked up to the door, and slid the key into the slot and turned. There was an audible click, and the door swung open quietly. Inside, like promised, everything was fully furnished. There was a decent leather couch and recliner in the living room area. In the kitchen, it had up-to-date appliances, a rather nice island in the middle with barstools surrounding it. This could all be seen from the front door. As Naruto walked in to further look around, Inoichi stood there watching Naruto explore his new home. After half an hour of looking around, Naruto met back up with Inoichi at the front of his house with another big smile on his face, and tackled Inoichi with a hug. Thank you, Naruto said as few tears came down his face. Inoichi-san. Inoichi rose an eyebrow and patted the boy's back, albeit feeling a bit awkward. It's alright, Naruto. It's the least I could do. Then after a moment coughed into his head. Alright, well, since that is taken care of, it's about time we go meet up with my family. Naruto nodded and followed Inoichi out of his new home. He turned around and locked the door to his new home, and pocketed the key. Inoichi turned and walked a few feet and stopped right in front of the flower shop. Alright, Gaki, here we are. Our shop is on the main floor while our housing in upstairs. This will be where you'll be helping out from time to time. Naruto nodded in understanding. With that taken care of, he walked into the building and a bell rang. Welcome to Yamanaka. Oh, welcome home, dear. A young woman came around the corner. She had long flowing blonde hair that would have reached her waist, but instead she had it up into a ponytail. She wore a purple t-shirt and dirt-covered blue jeans. What happened to you yesterday? I was quite worried. Inoichi walked over to his wife with a smile, kissed her on her cheek. I was helping the Gaki here, and some unfortunate situations arose, he stated, and after she looked over to see Naruto, she realized what had happened. Well, it's in the past now, but I will tell you, he is our new neighbor now. Really? She looked surprised. Well, that's great. She smiled at Naruto. Now Ino will have someone to play with. Ino. Naruto cocked his head to the side, confused. That name sounds familiar. Inoichi chuckled. Well, I would hope so. You are in her class after all. Naruto nodded. I know I've heard the name, but I don't think I've seen her. As if on cue, Ino came running around the corner calling for her mother. Mommy, where do you, Daddy? She ran over to Inoichi in a flash of purple, orange, and blonde hair and tackled him with a hug. She was wearing a faded orange shirt with a long purple skirt, and her blonde hair only came to her shoulders. There was a hair clip keeping her bangs from hanging in front of her eyes. After a few moments of hugging her father, she turned around and spotted Naruto. They both looked at each other for a moment, before Ino walked forward and poked the whisker marks on his face. Why do you have whiskers? Naruto looked genuinely surprised and uncomfortable. Well, maybe not the correct words. It felt nice, but given the situation, it felt more awkward for him. I don't know, I was born with them. Ino's eyes went wide. Really? Wow. They look cute on you. Naruto looked hurt by that, and slightly pouted. I'm not cute. Boys are not supposed to be cute. This conversation went on for several minutes between the two, and Inoichi and his wife Yami couldn't help but laugh. It would seem that Naruto and Ino would have no problems with being friends with one another. I hate to interrupt you two from your lovely banter. Inoichi chuckled at their flushed faces, but I just wanted to let you two know you'll be working with each other here at the shop since we're neighbors, so Ino, I expect you to teach what you know. Ino nodded with a determined smile on her face. Inoichi chuckled again and continued with an innocent look. Now that is out of the way, it would seem that the Gaki here would need some help with a new wardrobe. He looked away as there was now a glint in both his daughter and wife's eyes. I was hoping you two could maybe help him out while I go talk with the Hokage. Well, dear, I would be more than happy to. Yami stated with a smile and latched onto Naruto's arm, who now had a sense of dread flowing through him. Inoichi stepped over to his wife and whispered into her ear, and her smile grew. Well, if that's the case, then we should get going now and we'll meet you there. In the next moment, both Yami and Ino were at the door with a scared Naruto in between the two of them. Where are we going? Where all young new upcoming ninjas go to get clothing. Yami said with a smile, and Ino held the same one, but it held no comfort for young Naruto. Now then, let's go. She grabbed onto Naruto again and took off faster than anyone could see, with Ino right next to her. Watching the receding dust cloud, Inoichi couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Maybe I should have just helped him. Shaking his head, he locked down his store and proceeded back to the Hokage's office. A few hours later. Hokage office. Hiruzen let out a sigh. I swear this paperwork grows every time I blink. Inoichi chuckled. I'm sure it's just your imagination, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen chuckled himself. Maybe so. Then an irritated look covered his face. To think that apartment manager tried to pull double the money on his closing agreement. How has that boy put up with it all? From what I have seen, he has been able to pull any good that has come from the bad. Inoichi stated with a sigh. Most people would have broken by now. Hiruzen scoffed. Well, now he'll be getting proper treatment. I'm still skeptical about the Nine Tails talking with him, but not much I can do about it right now. Inoichi nodded, and at that moment Hiruzen stood and made his way over to a safe that held some private possessions of his and Naruto's. Hiruzen pulled a scroll out of the safe that had a white whirlpool design as a seal. It could only be opened by the blood of an Uzumaki like Naruto. I never thought I would have to give this to Naruto-kun so early. But a smile came over his face. Well, he was always full of surprises. He shut the safe, and walked over back to his desk right as a knock came on the door. Come in. When the door opened, the eyes of both Hiruzen and Inoichi widened in surprise. When Naruto walked in, he was almost a completely different person. He wasn't wearing goggles anymore. Instead, he was wearing an orange t-shirt, under a white hooded jacket with thick black outlines. Instead of the blue shorts he was wearing, he was now loose gray cargo shorts that had small kunai pouch on his right leg. His worn sandals were gone to find a brand new pair of black sandals. If weren't for the whisker marks, they both could have sworn they saw a miniature version of Minato. Though the only thing that was out of place was the obvious Kushina-like glare that was directed at Inoichi. You left me to die, ponytail. That was pure hell. Shaken from his stupor, Inoichi chuckled. Hey, now I'm sure it wasn't that bad. Oh yeah, Naruto shuddered. You didn't have to shop with them after they finished with mine. They didn't. Inoichi was ultimately shocked, and he bowed his head. I am terribly sorry, Gaki. I didn't know you would have to go through that. Naruto just shook his head. If I can get a meal out of it, everything will be fine. He managed the smile, trying to get certain images out of his head. Poor Naruto had lost some, if not most, of his innocence during that trip to the clothing store, and it would not be his last time either. I consider that quite the fair trade indeed. Inoichi nodded and faced the Hokage. I am sure now it's your turn, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen nodded, and gestured Naruto to come closer. Just a few things, Naruto-kun, and I'll let you go on your way. First, he pulled out a receipt slip from his robes. Your savings bond has been cashed, and placed within a bank in the Yamanaka compound. Your half of your payment has been sent to agency already, and your clothing fees have been given to Inoichi-san here. He then handed the slip to Naruto. Here is what is left over. Naruto looked at it, and his eyes bulged. This is all mine. Hiruzen nodded. Your parents were by no means poor, Naruto-kun. They were excellent ninja, and so they had plenty of money to spare. Naruto looked down at the slip again. His head jerked back up. But you said this was only a portion of it. Hiruzen nodded once more. Indeed I did. He adopted a serious look for a moment. Do not let this burn a hole in your pocket, Naruto-kun. Money flies faster than you can imagine. With a serious nod from Naruto, Hiruzen continued. Now for the final gift. He lifted a scroll off his desk. This is the Uzumaki clan scroll as promised. Keep it secured, Naruto-kun, by any means necessary. Naruto took the scroll and tried to open it, but it would not budge. What gives, Hokage Gigi? Hiruzen chuckled. It's a blood seal, Naruto-kun. You have to put a bit of your blood on the seal for it to open. It will only open with the blood of an Uzumaki as a safety precaution. Giving a nod in understanding, put the scroll in pouch that was behind his back and zipped it shut. That is all I have for you, Naruto-kun. I wish you luck in the future, and I look forward to what you can achieve. I'll make you proud, Hokage Gigi. He gave him a thumbs up and bright smile. You already have, Naruto-kun, more than you know. Hiruzen thought with a smile, and spoke once more. Now I'm afraid I must be getting back to work. with this wretched paperwork. He scoffed at the end, glaring at the papers on his desk. Naruto was quiet once more. Hey Hokage Gigi, the fox has a suggestion. Hiruzen rose an eyebrow. Is that so? Naruto nodded. He said, why don't you use something like a shadow clone? Whatever that means. Naruto said with a shrug. Hiruzen was at first shocked, and then he ultimately felt humiliated. I cannot believe it was so simple. He covered his face with a hand, then he jerked up in his seat. Wait, how does he know about that? After a moment Naruto answered, he said he's seen it before in his previous containers and knows their fundamentals. He even said he would teach it to me, to further my training. How, I don't even know. Naruto shrugged. Hiruzen was a little angry that the Nine Tails would even suggest learning something so dangerous. You don't even know how to mold chakra yet, Naruto-kun, and shadow clone technique is very dangerous. It's in our forbidden scroll for a reason. It takes quite a bit of chakra to make one, let alone two. Again Naruto was silent and then spoke. He said not to worry. He said, for my age I have a ludicrous amount of chakra that I could make over 1,000 clones. Hiruzen paled. 1,000. He was extremely worried, because the boy's reserves would only continue to grow at this point. You must understand one thing, Naruto-kun. You cannot by any means dispel your clones all at once if you ever reach that amount. The damage it could do to your mind is not to be taken lightly. Naruto nodded in understanding. I'll be careful, Hokage Gigi. The fox says that I will only be able to dispel them in groups of 10, so that way that doesn't occur. I'm still lost on how it works, but I'll learn eventually. Hiruzen nodded. Indeed. Well, in that case. He made the ram hand seal, and next to him was the exact copy of himself, and it began to work on the paperwork. I will be able to take care of other things that I need to catch up on. Yamanaka household. Wow, this is really good. Naruto almost shouted as he dug into his meal. It almost pained Inoichi and Yami to see Naruto so excited over a semi-decent meal. Well, I'm glad you like it, Naruto-kun. Yami said with a smile. You're welcome to stop over for dinner anytime. Naruto nodded with a smile. Awesome. Then Naruto continued to dig into his meal. Ino then came over with a napkin. You're being sloppy. She scolded, then tried wiping his face. Rubbing against his whisker marks, a sound emanated from Naruto that silenced the room, but Ino kept rubbing, and they found that, you're purring. Ino stated, and brought Naruto out of his stupor, his face beet red. I did not purr. He stated, trying to hide flushed. Meanwhile both Ino and Yami both thought, so cute. Trying to save what pride the boy had left, Inoichi spoke up. Well, I'm sure Naruto has had a long day, and could use some rest, especially since tomorrow he'll be helping out here at the store. Naruto nodded quickly. Ah. Yami and Ino pouted, but reluctantly decided to let him go home. As Naruto exited, he turned around and waved. Thanks for everything, Ponytail. Inoichi grumbled, while Yami chuckled, and Ino stepped forward and hugged Naruto and stepped back with a flushed face. I'll see you tomorrow. With that she ran back into the building, leaving a blushing Naruto behind as he turned and walked to his house. Naruto was in a semi-daze as went through new motions in his house. He took a hot shower for once, and got into his new pajamas. When he finally went and rested in his bed, did the memories of that happened today really come into clarity. He had a new home, new clothes, new friends, and a new future, and he was going to make the best of it. He would make his mother and father proud. He would go above and beyond the expectations this village had of him. He would show them all who he was, and that was Naruto Uzumaki. He was breaking the habit, and going to prove them all wrong. With a grin on his face, Naruto slowly drifted off to sleep, and starting tomorrow he would begin his journey to be the greatest ninja the world has ever known. It has been a few months since some drastic changes have been made in Naruto's life. A new home, new friends, and another shot at a successful future. Though right now all he wanted was for Ino to get out the door so they could go to school. Come on Ino, we don't have all day ya. No. Naruto shouted in front of Ino's bedroom door. I'm brushing my hair, I'll be down in a minute. Ino shouted back at her bedroom door and was indeed brushing her growing blonde hair. Naruto sighed and went back down the stairs where Inoichi was already sipping his morning coffee, and Yami was preparing a light breakfast. Normally they would have plenty of time to eat, but recently Ino has been getting into her looks. So in consequence they have almost been late a few times. He knew he didn't have to wait for her, but they've been close friends since he moved in next door. So he couldn't just bring himself to leave her behind. Naruto grumbled as he took a seat in the kitchen. I mean, we were almost later than Shikamaru, and he always the last one to class. Inoichi chuckled. Now that is quite a feat indeed. Especially if he's anything like his father. He took another sip of his coffee. At that moment Ino began walking down the stairs in her traditional outfit of a faded orange shirt and purple skirt. She still had her purple brush in hand as she took a seat and began to eat what breakfast was in front of her. Good morning, Mom, Dad, she said cheerily and looked over at Naruto and stuck out her tongue. Good morning to you too. Naruto replied, sticking his own tongue at her. Right back at you. When Ino turned her head back to her father, Naruto noticed that the back of her hair was a mess, and let out a sigh and picked up her brush and stood behind her and began brushing her hair. What are you doing? Ino jerked around and glaring at Naruto, who had his hands up defensively. Your hair is messy, so I'm fixing it. Is that okay? Naruto asked, and after a moment Ino turned around with a huff without answering, but Naruto took that as a sign to continue. As Naruto resumed brushing her hair, Ino closed her eyes as she leaned back in her chair with a small smile of content on her face. For those spectating, it looked absolutely adorable. Inoichi had a risen eyebrow in contemplation, while Yami had a bright smile of knowing. She knew plenty that the two of them had crushes on one another, but they were each unaware of the other. After a few more minutes Inoichi coughed into his hand, startling Naruto and Ino. I'm sure if you want to be on time you may want to go right about now. Naruto looked over at the clock and quickly handed the brush to Ino. You got everything, Ino? Ino grabbing her backpack and her bento from the counter. Yeah, I got it, let's go. And with that the two bolted out of the Yamanaka household with Inoichi shaking his head in amusement, and Yami laughing quietly behind her hand. While on their way to school they actually ran into Sakura Haruno. Her most notable features were her pink hair, and to those who were mean enough to point it out, her large forehead. She's a good friend of Ino's, but for some reason or another doesn't like Naruto. Not that it bothered him much, he wouldn't let his friend choose one or the other, he just let things be, and thankfully so did Sakura, though lately things have been heated between the two of them. Running late, forehead. Ino shouted out. I could ask the same to you, Ino pig. Sakura replied as they began running more to the school in a race. Naruto merely let out a sigh, and kept a comfortable pace behind the two of them as to not get between the two. He had done that once before, and it did not end well for him. So the race to school began, well, at least for those two anyway. Because of course they were racing to see who could be the first to sit next to Sasuke Uchiha. Who, in Naruto's opinion, was by the far the most brooding person you could meet. The most you could get out of the guy was a grunt, that is, unless you beat him something. Naruto excelled at this at times nowadays, and it seemed to shock his class that he took things so seriously now. Though thankfully there was only a few people who actually berated him for surpassing their precious Uchiha. This has included Sakura, of course, but Ino had decided to encourage Naruto. Even though she semi-pursued the Uchiha, it still hadn't stopped the little moments between the two, like this morning. As they approached the school building, Naruto jumped ahead of the two girls so he wouldn't get stuck behind the door to the classroom. With that done, he was finally able to enter the classroom and take his seat at the back next to the spot that Shikamaru would sit at once he got there. He shared a fist bump with Choji before he sat down at his own seat. Seeing as he had a few minutes before class started, he pulled up his hood and leaned against the wall to rest his eyes. Dobi. Naruto let out a sigh, and kept his eyes shut. What can I do for you, Tem? So much for resting. Kurama chuckled from within his mind. Now unfortunately for him, this seemed to attract quite a bit of attention from everyone in the class, including the fangirls for Sasuke, and oddly enough Naruto's, who he found utterly annoying, but he at least told them that he wasn't interested and talked to them as friends, which in turn made them like him more. Go figure. Don't call him that, Sakura shouted at Naruto. One of the girls on Naruto's side, who was named Yumi, shouted back with, he called him names first. Naruto put up a wincing smile and asked, could you girls please not shout? Some do have sensitive hearing, and well, it can be kind of rude though. Thank you for your concern. Sakura merely huffed, and Yumi nodded with sparkles in her eyes. He turned his attention back to Sasuke. Now what can I do for you? What did you get on the last test, Dobi? He asked bluntly, eyeing him. What's it to you? Naruto responded, trying his best not to smirk. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. He didn't like to have his requests questioned. It doesn't matter, just answer the question. No, I don't think I will. Naruto leaned back against the wall, and shut his eyes. He ended up giving a shoo gesture with his hand. What's the matter, Dobi? Afraid you did worse than me? Like you could do any better than me, one of the elite. Sasuke bragged, stuck up his chin pompously. Naruto opened an eye at him and gave a slight chuckle. Whatever helps you sleep at night. I could care less how I did on the said test. I gave it my best shot, but in all honesty, that paperwork means nothing to what we'll do when we graduate. And before Sasuke could retort, I would suggest you go take your seat. As you may know, our sensei will be here any second now. Sasuke merely huffed and sulked away to his seat, where he would continue to brood the rest of his day away. After a few seconds, Shikamaru walked in through the door with a yawn, and sat down next to Naruto and shared a fist bump with him before laying on his arms to sleep his day away. As soon as that happened, the teacher walked in, the class quieted down, and thus the lectures began. Midday. Academy school grounds. Naruto let out yawn as stretched as he walked over to his favorite patch of shade tree. Man, this morning's lecture felt like it would take forever. Ino giggled walking next to him. Well, we all know math isn't your favorite subject. Naruto chuckled and scratched the back of his head. Yeah, you're right. How about you, Shikamaru? It's all a drag if you ask me. He grumbled, walking alongside Naruto. That's your answer for everything, Shikamaru. Choji stated, digging into one of his ever-present bags of chips. They all shared a laugh as they sat at their usual spot and broke into their lunches. Choji's, of course, was the largest of the bunch, but yet for him that was average. Shikamaru's was the most average of the group. Now if one were to look at Ino's, one would think she ate a lot, but all it was, it had 2 lunches within. One for Naruto and one for Ino. Shikamaru was first to finish, and so, as he normally did, sprawled out onto his back and watched the clouds lazily drift on by. Ino went to talk with some other girls. Choji sat next to Shikamaru looking at nothing particular, while Naruto was surprisingly fast asleep, resting up against the tree. In another clearing, there was a supervised spar taking place between the ever hot-headed Kiba Inuzuka and the forever brooding Sasuke Uchiha. It was nothing too impressive, considering they wouldn't be learning the academy-style taijutsu until next year, but Sasuke already knew most of his near-extinct clan's taijutsu, Interceptor Fist. So it was really a one-sided match, not that it wouldn't help Sasuke's already inflated ego. After a few minutes, the match was called, with Kiba on the ground nursing his sore ribs, and a smirking Uchiha above him. Of course there was the cheering from his fan group, which he ignored, of course. Without even bothering to offer any help to Kiba, he brooded off somewhere on the school grounds. Wow, Sasuke-kun is powerful. Sakura practically squealed in delight in seeing her crush win easily. Ino merely shrugged, not all that impressed. He already knows a taijutsu form, so it was kind of obvious who would win. Sakura looked appalled. Even if the mud knew taijutsu, there would be no way he could beat Sasuke-kun. This banter continued on until it somehow ended up with who could get Sasuke's heart first. That was how the rest of their lunch break was spent till the bell rang, and the students went to pick up their bentos and get back to their assigned seats. Ino rushed over to her spot by the tree and began picking up her bento when she looked up and realized Naruto had fallen asleep. "He's just rubbing it in my face now," Shikamaru grumbled, sitting up, noticing how peaceful Naruto looked. Choji, of course, munching on his chips, looking at the same sight. "I thought he looked kind of tired this morning." "Was he at it again, Ino?" He looked over at Ino to see her staring at the resting blonde. Ino nodded and looked over at the two others. "Yeah, he was training in his backyard last night. I'm pretty sure he was studying last night too." After wrapping up their bento box, she walked over to Naruto and then whispered into his ear, "Free Ichiraku ramen." Naruto was instantly standing up. "Free Ichiraku ramen? Where?" He looked around frantically but noticed the three laughing friends of his. He pouted and looked over at Ino. "That was mean, Ino." Ino stuck out her tongue. "Would you rather me do the other thing?" Naruto waved his arms frantically. "Nope. That was perfectly fine. Oh hey, bell rang, I think we should go." With that he bolted off into the school, leaving a giggling Ino, and a confused Shikamaru and Choji. "So what's munch the other thing?" Choji asked as he stood and munched on his bag of chips. Ino blushed for a moment before shaking her head. "Sorry, you'll have asked Naruto that. That's an inside secret," she replied with a wink and rushed off after Naruto. "Troublesome girls." Shikamaru grumbled and walked lazily over to the school building with Choji right by his side. Later that day, Uzumaki residence. "Come on, Ino, you're the one who wanted me to help you with your taijutsu in turn for helping me with my math homework." Naruto let out a sigh as Ino sat on his back porch, refusing to budge. "I don't want to bruise my arms." She pouted and crossed her arms. Naruto groaned. "And I don't want mess with multiplication tables." She refused to listen and turned her head to the side. Naruto was beginning to get frustrated, but instead got an idea. "How about this? We'll just cover the katas of the Academy Taijutsu. No contact." She turned to face Naruto, who had a determined look on his face, and reluctantly nodded. "Fine." She huffed and hopped off his porch. "Let's get this over with." With a thankful nod, they began running through the basic katas. It wasn't overly hard to do, and they wouldn't be required to know this till next year, but it doesn't hurt to know it ahead of time. Though Naruto already had the Academy Taijutsu down flat, and was working on the Uzumaki Taijutsu, linked motion. It relied heavily on the bloodline of chakra chains, or at least a type of chained weapon. Its main goal was to snag enemies and rip them to shreds in fluid motion. A true master of the style could have 360-degree defense, since the way they moved their bodies was spherical. Naruto's progress on the linked motion was painfully slow. The actual rotation wasn't that bad once you learned to shift your targets as you moved, but it was the weapon portion that the problem. There are no weapons for his age, or size for that matter, that he could use to practice with. He also couldn't produce a single chain, let alone a few chain links. According to his clan scroll, he would have to wait a few years to be able to find out if he even had the bloodline. Though he was confident he did, he wouldn't count on it till he was sure he had it. So until then, all Naruto could do was practice the motion so he wouldn't be disoriented later on. After a couple of hours, and working up quite a sweat, Naruto thought it time to stop. "You're getting better, Ino." Breathing somewhat heavily, Ino nodded with a small smile. "Thank you." "Well, I'm gonna go shower. I'll see you in a little bit." She waved and took off through his house to next door. This had been the norm for them for a while now. She would do some hands-on training with him, and he would do some book work with her. A simple trade that helped leaps and bounds. He even helped Choji and Shikamaru from time to time of certain aspects. Though with Shikamaru it was more like playing a game of shogi or go, but he still managed to get the lazy Nara to do some basic katas. Surprising enough, he could pick it up quickly and then he would resume his favorite hobby of cloud gazing. So after a quick shower, Naruto grabbed his pack and walked over to Ino's house. He opened the door and was greeted with the smell of flowers and potting soil. Afternoon. Yami poked her head from around the door to their greenhouse and waved. Hello Naruto-kun, how was your day? It was pretty good, Yami-san. Naruto replied with a smile. I'm happy it's the weekend though. Yami chuckled. That's good to hear. You ready to work this weekend? Naruto nodded. Yeep, it's a harvest and delivery day, right? Yami nodded with a smile. Indeed it is, I'm assuming you'll be manning the cashier. She had a knowing smile on her face. It was no secret that when it came to plants he didn't have the greenest thumb. Though he still tried from time to time to get better with them. Smiling sheepishly, Naruto replied, yeah, if wouldn't mind, last time I nearly destroyed an order. It's fine Naruto-kun, we all make mistakes. Yami disappeared for a moment before reappearing. I do believe Ino is waiting for you upstairs, so go ahead, we'll talk about your shifts later. Naruto nodded and went up the stairs, leaving Yami to tend to the business. When Naruto came into the kitchen, he was greeted with a freshly cleaned Ino, and a tired Inoichi, but was engaging with Ino with a smile. Yeah, he was sleeping like a log. Ino giggled and Inoichi chuckled. Is that so? How'd you wake him up? Did you mess with his whiskers? Inoichi smirked, knowing full well Naruto was in the room. Ino giggled again. No, but I teased him with free ramen. Oh my, that's almost as bad with him. Inoichi chuckled and turned to face a semi-red-faced Naruto. Well, hey there Gaki, you ready for your lesson or are you going to fall asleep on us? Naruto grumbled and sat down at the table. I won't fall asleep. Inoichi just laughed, while Ino giggled and Naruto continued to grumble. Till finally they were able to get started on his math. It wasn't anything too complicated, but a little help didn't hurt, and besides all his assignments were copied and sent to the Hokage to have professionally checked. It was the only way for Naruto to get any fair grading. At the beginning there was a problem with falsified test being turned in, but it was taken care of when the academic staff got a thorough scolding, but just to be safe a copy of his homework was still sent. After his homework was dealt with, Inoichi and Yami talked with him about his shifts for the weekend, and did a little bit of accounting exercises with him so he was on top of his money situation. After it was all said and done, it was around 10 at night when Naruto went home, and crashed into his bed. A few months later, summer, Yamanaka flower shop. Naruto was sitting patiently at the cash register waiting for his shift to be over so he could go train his chakra control. It was a bonus assignment of the summer vacation to work on their chakra control so they could learn the basic clone jutsu. Though Naruto already knew the shadow clone jutsu, he still needed to work on his control to not summon so many clones. He had a problem with it since his reserves were so large that jutsu that required very little chakra were basically impossible, much like the clone jutsu. Yet that didn't deter him from trying to balance it out. If anything, he didn't want to waste chakra, because wasted chakra was almost a one-way ticket to death. Ching. Welcome to Yamanaka Flower Shop, how may I help you? Naruto asked with a smile. Oh, one thing should be mentioned, Naruto was disguised by a minor genjutsu, making his hair brown and his whisker marks hidden so that way villagers weren't deterred from shopping at the shop. Normally Yami or Inoichi wouldn't want their business, but this was one of their main sources of income, so they had to do this. Ah yes, can I get a bouquet of roses? A male villager asked, looking around the display flowers. Of course, how many? We have some already made from 5, 7, and of course the standard 12. Naruto said with a smile. God, I don't know how Yami or Ino puts up with this fake smile and attitude all day. I'll take the one with 7, thank you. The villager said after a moment of thought, and so Naruto rang up his order, and sent the man on his way. After he left, Naruto let out a sigh and looked up at the clock. Ah, closing time, finally. Naruto jumped off his seat, and switched the sign around from open to closed. Yami came out of the greenhouse with a smile. Good work today, Naruto-kun, you're definitely getting better. Thank you, but I still don't see how you do it day in and day out. Naruto stretched, and let the genjutsu fall off him. Well, I'm going home, and do some practicing. Tell Ino when she gets back that she's more than welcome to come over and work with me. Yami nodded with her ever-present smile. Of course, Naruto-kun, I'll see you tomorrow. Naruto nodded and began walking out the door. See you then. Naruto walked over to his house and waved to the few walking through the street with a smile, and entered his home. It was homier than when he first started out all those months ago. Now there were pictures around with him and Ino's family, and even a few with just him, Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji. Though his personal favorite is the one with just him and Ino, where they had their arms around each other's shoulders giving the peace sign with their biggest grins. These were open for display on a table by the entrance of his house. The rest of the house had his own little touches here and there. There were even touches of Ino since she had insisted that he have flowers. Naruto always did his best in taking care of the flowers. So Kurama, what's your take on the chakra control exercises? Naruto questioned as he sat on his back porch looking around his yard. I'll have you tree running by the end of the summer vacation, brat. Kurama chuckled from within his mind. Go find some small pebbles. Normally leaves would be sufficient, but due to your large reserves we'll start with something a little heavier and work our way down. Naruto did a mental salute and set off on his task of collecting his required equipment. It didn't take him very long to find a decent amount, and so sitting cross-legged on his porch he awaited further instruction. Alright, brat, much like the leaf exercise, concentrate chakra into your palm and keep pebble level. Kurama instructed, and Naruto set off on his task. The first couple of times the pebble in his hand literally shot off into the sky. To say the least, Kurama was humored to the point he couldn't breathe. So after having to take deep calming breaths, he resumed and tried to feel the chakra flow through his hand. Focusing on his palm, he felt a slight trickling feeling flowing to his hand, and he kept it that way. The pebble began hover right above his palm, much like the leaf was supposed to. When Naruto saw this, he was excited, but didn't dare break his concentration. Just like that, Kurama stated, seeing Naruto's progress, hold it there for as long as you can. The goal here is to be able to do it subconsciously. To do it without thought. Naruto merely nodded and concentrated at the task at hand. Despite trying to keep the same flow, it was continuously fluctuating, making it exceedingly hard to keep the same level going through. He didn't know how he was supposed to put any less chakra through if he was putting what he believed to be the minimum amount he could output. This didn't deter him though, and so for the rest of the evening he focused on this single task. He didn't even hear Ino knocking on his door. I think I'm getting the hang of this, I actually think I can use less, let's try, that was his thought process before smack, ga. Naruto fell onto his back, cradling the top of his head in his hands, and looked to his side to find a peeved-looking Ino clenching her hand into a fist. Why did you do that, Ino? Ino pouted at him, I was waiting at your door for 10 minutes. You wouldn't answer the door. Naruto grinned sheepishly, scratching the back of his head, moving sitting up, sorry about that, hehe. I was really into my chakra control practice. Ino looked around and saw the pebbles on the porch. The teacher said we're supposed to be using leaves, not pebbles, baka. Naruto nodded. They did, but I have a bigger pool of chakra. So I have to start off with something a bit heavier. Naruto shrugged. I plan on working my way down to leaves, hopefully. He grinned, and stretched out his arms. Ino watched as he stretched. Have you done your exercises this evening? Naruto sat stock still, and then groaned, ah man, well, no time like the present. Care to join me? Ino shook her head. Not this evening, I already took my shower, thank you. Maybe tomorrow since it's the weekend. Naruto nodded, and then examined Ino more closely. Her eyes were slightly red. Naruto's brow furrowed in concern. Are you alright, Ino? Why wouldn't I be? Ino put on a smile, but Naruto knew it was fake. He used to see it in a broken mirror every morning. You know you can tell me anything, right? I won't force it out of you. Naruto looked down at his hands. Sometimes it's better to tell than it is to hold it in. After a few moments of silence, Naruto thought he made his best friend angry, but shortly after that thought he felt Ino's back press against his as they sat on his porch. They leaned against each other listening to the silence until Ino began her story. She had gotten into an argument with Sakura. Normally this wouldn't have been a big deal, but this one wasn't like the others. It got heated because they were saying they would be the one to get their precious Sasuke-kun. It went to the point where Sakura said something she shouldn't have. She didn't want to be Ino's friend anymore. She would fight her to the end for his heart. That was putting it nicely. Now this may seem like a petty argument, but for kids their age it was a pretty big deal, especially since they were friends before she even met Naruto. As Naruto listened, he couldn't help but feel angry at two people. Yet it wouldn't do any good to take any action against them. So instead he reached with his hand and grabbed Ino's and held it in silence. Ino had shed a few more tears from recalling the memories, but she didn't feel anywhere near as bad in Naruto's presence. It felt comforting, and just knowing that he was there was enough for her. After a few more moments in silence, Ino finally spoke. Thank you, Naruto. She used her free hand to wipe some of the tears from her eyes. She let go of his hand, turned her waist and rested her head against his back. Don't ever leave me, okay? Naruto was shocked. He had never seen Ino like this before, but he put on a small smile, and closed his eyes. Wouldn't dream of it. Smiling, Ino stood up and grabbed Naruto's head in her hands. What you doing, Ino? Naruto asked curiously, not being able to see behind him. She bent down and kissed the spot where she had hit Naruto, and in turn Naruto's face burned bright red, and steam could almost be seen coming from his ears, earning a giggle from Ino. My way of apologizing. She ran to the back door, turning around giving a true grin and waved, see ya tomorrow, Naruto-kun. With that she ran through the door, through his house, and out the front door, leaving a very confused, beet red Naruto on the back porch. Kurama chuckled inside of his head. As always, you humans are ever amusing. Shut up. Naruto mumbled in his mind. Konoha Ninja Academy. 2 years later, end of 3rd academic year. Come on Naruto, you got this. Sasuke-kun could never lose. You can do it, Sasuke-kun. These were merely some of the cheers going on around the competitors' circle on the school grounds. Right now it was the end of the year assessment testing to map out the progress of academy students. Those who were present were some of the parents, 2 different Chunin examiners, and the Hokage himself, well, at least a clone of himself. Inside of the ring was the ever-brooding Queen Sasuke Uchiha with a determined smirk on his face, and of course the prank king Naruto Uzumaki with an equally determined smirk. All the previous spars were pretty standard for their ages, but this fight was the most anticipated. The class was equally divided on who would win this match. Of course each side had their few fangirls, which Naruto would never understand why they would become ninja if they weren't going to do anything productive. If there was one thing he and Sasuke could agree on, it was that, well, besides to agree to disagree, of course. It's a shame we can't use our respective fighting styles, Naruto stated as he stood at main pose for the academy-style taijutsu. Sasuke grunted, as if you could have your own style, Dobi. I don't even know why you bother fighting back, you're still going to lose. Naruto rose an eyebrow. I never give up, I will fight till the end, as that is the way of the shinobi. With that said, the two rushed forward and began trading blows once more. To the side, the Hokage clone had a small smile at Naruto's words, while the 2 Chunin wore small smirks of approval. The two knew Naruto would go far. He kept that train of thought. As the fight continued on with the two never giving ground on the other. Despite everything, Sasuke found a slight grin on his face. He was having fun with this fight, someone to push his limits. Naruto was having the same thoughts as the two continued to trade blows. Neither had actually landed a hit on the other as they moved in perfect synchronization. It was almost hypnotizing to the crowd around them. To the Chunin's eyes, they could see that some areas could use some improvement, but that came with experience, and of course when their bodies began to fill out. Though of course the academy style was not for everyone, but since this was required for the exam they had to nitpick on their reports. As the minutes dragged and the two sparring began to breathe harder, the Hokage clone gave a nod to one of the Chunin examiner. He stepped forward, rose his arm, and called the match. I hereby call this match a draw. The two immediately stepped back from one another and bowed respectfully while panting, I'll wipe the floor with you next time, Dobi. Sasuke stated, locking eyes with Naruto. Naruto grinned back. Funny how you say that every time and it always ends the same way, in a draw. He turned and walked away, while Sasuke semi-scowled at his back before turning around to brood his way back into the classroom. The end of the year instructions. Back inside in the school building, the students chattered away excited for the end of the year. Some talking about the trips they would be going, others about their training schedules, and of course the usual gossiping from the girls. Your fight was exceptionally well done. The ever-stoic Shino Aburame complimented. Thanks, Shino. Naruto grinned. Your fight wasn't that bad either. Shino nodded. Kiba-san was formidable opponent. Kiba grumbled and rubbed his sore jaw, and his ever-faithful Akamaru yipped from atop of his head, I hate academy style, it's so rigid compared to my clans. Naruto could only nod and agree, it's not my favorite, but next year they're allowing us to use our own. It's troublesome, having to relearn everyone's unique style. Shikamaru stated from his resting position on the table, while Choji merely nodded, very content on his bag chips. Is anything not troublesome for you, Shikamaru? Naruto asked rhetorically. He got an answer anyway, cloud gazing is one. Right, how could I forget? Naruto tapped his temple jokingly. They continued their conversation for another few minutes when the clone of the Hokage walked into the room, and silence followed. The clone eyed the room, and he gave a warm smile. You all have done exceptionally well this year. Everyone in this room shows great potential, and as of this point you have passed the halfway point. The next 3 years will be more intensive in your training, and of course when most of you begin your paths of your families or clans. You all contain the will of fire, that has been passed down from generation to generation. You are our future of the village. I look forward to what you have to offer for our village. So now I bid you good luck and I will see you all in 3 years' time for your graduation exams. With that, the clone dispersed with a puff of smoke. The instructor of their first 3 years said farewell and bid them good luck into the future. Students began to file out of the school building, dividing off into groups or meeting up with their parents. Most of the students who were in clans collected their students. This was no exception to most of Naruto's friends. Though Naruto didn't mind at all, he wouldn't hinder his friends' progress because he would be alone. In a way, it made it easier for him to train his own way with his shadow clones and clan techniques. So at the current moment it was just him walking home with the occasional glare thrown at him or the smile and wave the closer he got to Yamanaka compound. Though he strayed a bit from his original pathway in search of ninja supply store. He needed some chakra paper. Naruto knew that he was young to begin dabbling in chakra natures, but one of the clan jutsus required wind chakra and water chakra. There was a reason that their crest was a whirlpool, after all. The only difference was that the jutsu wasn't bloodline based. If you had the appropriate chakra natures you could learn the technique. So thus his mission to find chakra paper. He came to the one supply store that he knew would supply him, and that was Himaware's Ninjaware. He walked in with a smile, and was greeted by a mountain of a man, And his name was Juan. Welcome. Oh, it's you, Naruto. His voice boomed with a hearty laugh. The man before Naruto was well-muscled and tanned. No hair on his head, but had a bushy beard, warm eyes. He wore a white t-shirt with a blacksmithing apron, and wore fire-retardant black pants and tan yellow work boots. What can I do for you? You don't need another fitting, do you? Naruto shook his head. No, I'm here to get some chakra paper. Would you happen to have some on you? Juan gave Naruto a grin. We just got a fresh shipment, can I ask what for? Just thought it would be neat to know, ya know. Naruto grinned. Help me plan out my training. Juan gave off a laugh. An excellent reason, my boy. I only have one request. Of course, Juan-san. Naruto replied respectfully. Juan grinned. Let me see what you get. That seems fair to me. Naruto nodded. So how much for one? It's on the house since you're a dedicated customer. Juan replied with a smirk, and pulled a piece of chakra paper from behind the counter. Now I'm sure you know how to use it, but I'll tell ya anyway. Just channel your chakra into the paper, and the effect should vary depending on your chakra nature. Split in half as wind, soaked as water, crinkling as lightning, turned to ash as fire, and finally crumbing to dust as earth. Naruto nodded, and took the paper in his hand. After a minute of just purely studying said paper, he finally channeled his chakra. A wave of excitement washed over Naruto. The paper spilt in half, meaning he had the wind nature, but both pieces of the paper also became soaked with water. He had both of the natures he wanted, and they were even stronger than he could have wanted. Well, that's not something you see every day. Juan commented, looking at the remains of the chakra paper. Naruto looked up with a curious look. Why's that? He had a general idea, but didn't hurt to get actual information. Well, this is the land of fire for a reason. Juan continued on to explain. Most of our ninja here have affinities for fire, and then the occasional lightning. Suna is the place where most wind-natured ninja are affiliated, and then there's Kiri where water-nature ninja are. Both of your chakra natures combat our common ones. Juan contemplated for a moment. Though there are the occasional water-nature ninja here, but wind is by far the hardest. The only one that I know of would be the Hokage's own son Asuma, and he's currently guarding the daimyo. Naruto merely shrugged. Well, it's not like I need to train with them right away, I just wanted to know. I got nothing but time right now. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Juan nodded. Well, I'm glad I got to see something interesting. He let out a boisterous laugh. Well, I'm sure you got things to do, so run along. Let me know if you need a fitting or even new set. Will do, Juan-san. See you later. With a wave, Naruto walked out the door, already beginning to map out his training schedule this summer. Naruto's private training ground. A week later. Naruto had stumbled upon this place when he was running away from Anbu from a prank he had pulled several years back. It was secluded, and it wasn't a part of the traditional training grounds given to the new genin teams, or current circulating teams. It was the perfect place to set his clones out to work without prying, and sometimes jealous, eyes. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto called out, and around him a group of 25 physical clones awaited orders. Alright, today is Jutsu Day. There was a cheer throughout the clones, and the extra clone stepped forward, and Naruto handed him the scroll to read through the jutsu portion. The jutsu that we are attempting to learn for the next few weeks is Vortex Palm. Getting a collection of nods, he continued. This is a stepping stone to spout devastation. So we have to get this one down before we go any further. The clone reading the scroll handed it back and popped, and all the clones knew what to do, and went off to at least attempt to work through it. I want you to work on trying to summon your chakra chains. Kurama interjected into his thought process. You need to learn that on your own, and not use clones to learn it. Jutsu is one thing, but to your mother that was special, a rite of passage among Uzumaki. Naruto nodded, and gave a small smile. Who am I to disagree? Opening up his treasured clan scroll, he began reading over the process of wielding and creating his chakra chains. He thought it was still too soon to learn, but it wouldn't deter him from trying. As he read it over for what seemed to be the 1000th time, it told him it may help to actually feel an actual chain, felt how it moved in his hands, and know the weight of the chain. So that is exactly what he did. Pulling out a storage scroll, made by himself, and brought out the chain he had been working with his taijutsu style. He pulled in front of him and began pulling it up from the ground. Watching as it uncoiled, sway, and flex at different angles. He completely immersed himself into his single task before him. When he got like this, there were only 2 people that could pull him out of it. Kurama, being in his mind after all, and of course his growing crush Ino. His next goal was to envision the chain within his mind. He closed his eyes, and cleared his mind of all thoughts, and imagined a single chain link, and then another, and so on. Seeing the chain his mind, he held out his hand palm, jutted out forward, and began pushing chakra to his palm as the scroll instructed. Keeping focused on the image before him, willed the chakra to take its shape. When he opened his eyes and was welcomed with the sight of nothing, absolutely nothing, Naruto let out a sigh. Well, I guess I just haven't reached that age yet. Kurama nodded within his mind. That is more than likely. Your mother didn't achieve it until the age of 14, but I wanted to see if your father's blood would help it progress quicker. Naruto shrugged. For all I know, I was doing it perfectly, but hey, if you have to hit a certain age, then so be it. Though the scroll said that it can be emotionally related, whatever that means. Kurama hummed thoughtfully for a moment. That tends to be the case for most clan bloodlines, but I can't recall if your mother was under an emotional situation or if it was due to hitting a general age. Well, it's no big deal. Naruto stretched and looked up at the sky to see the sun setting in the distance. Wow, time flies. Naruto mumbled. It's a good thing that you train in secluded areas. Kurama shook his head in his mindscape. If this were combat, you would be dead. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Well, this is why I'm an academy student, and not a fully fledged ninja. Kurama scoffed, and let Naruto be. Dispelling his clones, he processed their knowledge. Surprisingly enough, they managed to get the fundamentals down, but they had to do repetitions on the hand signs to be able to produce what he wanted. He ran through a single set of hand seals, pouring a bit more chakra into the jutsu. Jutting out his right palm forward, and bracing his left hand on his right forearm. He could feel the water spinning in hand, and felt a grin work its way onto his face. Twitching his wrist, he saw a torrent water surge from his hand, spinning fiercely. It wasn't as powerful as it should have been, but it did peel the bark of the tree he was aiming for. Now Vortex Palm can be used 2 different ways. It can be used mid-range like he had just accomplished, unleashing a powerful force of water from his hand that swirls violently. Then there's the close range capability. If the user gets up close and personal, they can directly apply to the target. It sends them off spinning harshly, but not before feeling as if they were smacked with a solid brick wall. Balling his hand into a fist, Naruto grinned. Yosh. I'm on my way. Calling it a day, Naruto leapt into the trees and made his way home. Yamanaka Compound Training Grounds. Ino was laying on the ground, panting and sweaty. Her father had worked her into the ground. Daddy, I can't take any more. She pouted. It wasn't far from the truth. She was low on chakra, and she had been given a thorough workout today. At least for her body standards in this case. Inoichi nodded. I suppose so. Well, we have all summer vacation. He looked down at his daughter and gave her a warm smile. Keep up the good work, and you'll be a powerful kunoichi in no time. Ino gave a small grin, and pulled herself off the ground. She walked alongside her father to their house. During the walk, she wondered how Naruto handled it. He had been training years before she was, and it was really evident that he was by far the strongest in the class. Sure, Sasuke was strong, and she knew he was forced to hold back due to being stuck with academy basics. Things were going to be interesting next school year, this much she knew. Though she was a bit worried about the taijutsu portion of her schooling. Her clan didn't really have a style of taijutsu. She figured she would be perfectly fine in the other categories, but taijutsu was definitely not her strong suit. Sure, she wanted to look great for Sasuke-kun, and maybe someone else. Yet unlike Sakura, who was content in just looking her best for him, she knew looks wouldn't save you in a battle, well, to an extent. Yeah, she went through kunoichi seduction training, it was sickening to her. Daddy. Ino spoke as they walked through the streets. Inoichi looked down, and rose an eyebrow. What should I do about taijutsu? This took him by surprise, but he could tell she was serious. What brought this up? Ino continued to look forward. Well, our clan doesn't have a taijutsu style, and the academy style isn't really all that great. I don't want to be caught in a situation and have nothing to get out of it. Inoichi felt a swell of pride inside. His daughter understood what most kunoichi still lacked today. Well, I'm glad you see it that way. I'll look into finding you a tutor for taijutsu. I encountered the same problem, but unfortunately my mentor has passed. Ino beamed up at her father, embraced him a hug. Thank you, Daddy. With a smile they continued walking on home, and by coincidence they ran into Naruto, who looked slightly worn out, but nonetheless gave them a smile. Ino felt a bit embarrassed being caught in such disgusting sight, but Naruto didn't seem to mind. Hey Naruto, how goes your training? Naruto gave her a thumbs up. It's going pretty well, and I see you were working hard. Awesome. Ino smiled a bit, and decided it wouldn't hurt a bit to ask, hey Naruto-kun. Naruto looked at expectantly, giving his undivided attention. Do you think you could teach me some taijutsu? Both Inoichi and Naruto had looks of surprise on their faces. Naruto's was because of the fact she was willing and looking for ways to improve her taijutsu. Inoichi's was because, well, she is his little girl. Though in all honesty he couldn't think of a better teacher than your peers. He'd actually seen Naruto's taijutsu in semi-action before, and he couldn't help but think it may very well fit Ino's flexibility. Naruto shook off the surprise, and rubbed the back of his neck. Well, the thing is, I only know two styles. The academy style, and well, link motion. Naruto knew he had to tread carefully with this conversation. Yeah, he liked Ino a lot, and has known for a few years. He didn't know how she would take knowing what he contained. Ino cocked her head to the side. Link motion. I don't remember that being a style in our studies. Well, it's kind of died off, and it was mainly used by the Uzumaki clan. I found it in a couple books in the library on and off chance trying to learn about my family. Now that wasn't a lie, he did go to the library to touch up on his family. I thought since it was my family's style I thought I would learn it. Though I don't know how proficient I am in it. Ino nodded. The answer was pretty sound. Would it be alright if I tried to learn it? Naruto hesitated. He wanted to help his friend, but not sure if handing out his family's style was wise. What do you think, Kurama? I know you were listening in. Indeed, Kurama was, but what Naruto couldn't see was a knowing grin on his face. Kurama was not a matchmaker, but when you've been imprisoned in two women, especially Uzumaki women, you tend to pick up on things. I don't see why not. It shouldn't hurt your training schedule either. In fact, it would be good practice for you anyways. If you say so, Naruto commented back, and looked back at Ino, who was waiting expectantly. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a problem, but be warned, it's not easy by any means easy, and it relies on flexibility and your other senses. Hi, Naruto-sensei. Ino gave a mock salute, and smile. Naruto chuckled and held a hand to his chin. Naruto-sensei, I like the ring to it. Don't get used to it. Ino stuck out her tongue at him, and he replied in kind, so what times will you be able to train me? I was thinking the morning before you start your regular training, as well as my own. Good way to get blood moving, don't ya think? Naruto grinned. Besides, I believe for the first few weeks we'll be working on the motions with this one. Ino's brow furrowed. which Naruto found quite adorable, just on the motions. Don't you think that's a bit much? Inoichi chuckled, bringing himself back into the conversation. Oh, believe me, princess, he knows what he's talking about. I've seen it in action, you'll want all that practice. Ino rose an eyebrow, but shrugged. Okay, well, I trust you. So tomorrow morning then. Naruto nodded. You got it. He stretched and let out a content sigh. Well, I'm gonna wash up and look over the other end-year practice assignments. Something about learning how to henge and such. Ino nodded. I'll be doing the same. See you later, Naruto-kun. And she walked into her house. Naruto waved and looked up at Inoichi, who was giving him a hard look, a ponytail. Naruto felt uncomfortable underneath his gaze. Inoichi rose an eyebrow. Well, I guess there's no harm, but if I find out you hurt her in the wrong ways. He cracked his knuckles to get his point across. Naruto nodded furiously. Understood, ponytail. He saluted and bolted into his house. Inoichi chuckled and walked inside. It would seem these next 3 years are going to be interesting indeed. Naruto's private training ground, 3 years later. Come on, brat, 2 more miles. Kurama stated inside his mind. Right now we find ourselves watching Naruto doing his usual set of morning laps, but of course Kurama kicked it up a notch. Naruto was panting lightly as he continued on his jog/run. Over the course of the 3 years his stamina and endurance had reached new heights. Most would consider his workload insane, but he knew 2 other shinobi who were way worse with their training methods. I know. Naruto grumbled inwardly. What wouldn't I give for different shirt though? Much to Naruto's discomfort, his long-sleeve black shirt was soaked with his sweat, but that only meant he had worked himself rather well. A few minutes later he finished his last 2 miles, and did some mild pacing to keep his muscles from cramping, and for his breathing to calm down. Looking up at the sky he found he had about 2 hours before he had to go to the academy. It was final examination day, and most importantly it was the day he knew he would graduate. Yet there was still one last thing he had to do before all of that, since it would be the last time he would be able to do it. So with a mischievous grin he took flight into the trees. Yamanaka household. Ino walked out of her house with her hair tied up, and arcing over her eye. She was dressed in her brand new ninja armor. She was practically guaranteed to graduate near the top of their class. So her father took her out to buy her new ninja gear as a graduation present. It consisted of high-collar sleeveless top, with light purple arm sleeves. Underneath she wore a typical mesh shirt which was covered with bandage wrapping all the way down her waist. Starting at her waist she wore a purple waistcloth, with black shorts underneath, which then had more bandage wrappings around her thighs. On her right leg was her brand new kunai pouch, and a standard issue waist pouch around her waist. Even though dressed as a ninja she knew she wouldn't have a problem turning a few heads. She hoped Sasuke would actually take notice of her, and maybe so would a certain blonde. Of course that thought just reminded her how far she was behind him, and that for whatever reason the school deemed someone else to be the higher kunoichi. The only reason she wouldn't be top kunoichi is because of Sakura being a total nerd and had near-perfect chakra control. It really peeved Ino that she still couldn't get her chakra control that good, and of course the fact that she wasn't book smart enough like Sakura made her angry, but she didn't let it bother her. She knew that book smarts weren't enough to keep you alive. So with that in mind she walked over to Naruto's house, and knocked on the door. Hearing a muffled, "Come in," she turned the knob, and walked in. She looked around, but couldn't find Naruto anywhere. "Naruto-kun, where are you?" "In the restroom, be out in a minute, make yourself comfortable," Naruto called out. Ino walked in, but before she continued she turned to look at the pictures on Naruto's entrance table and smiled. It showed all the good times that they shared, and also some class photos. There was one from their summer trip last year as a class. Everyone was in their swimsuits smiling at the camera. Though like a tradition, when it started she didn't know, but there were multiple photos of every year at the end of a school year they had their arms around each other's shoulders, and giving the peace sign with their biggest smiles. Tearing her eyes from the photos, she made her way into his kitchen and sat down at the island eyeing the clock. They had time to kill, but if they weren't careful they would be late, and she would prefer to leave that Shikamaru. Phew, sorry about that, worked up a sweat this morning, Naruto stated, coming around the corner into the kitchen. Ino turned her head around to reply when the word stopped in her throat. Her eyes slightly widened in surprise. Naruto's attire had changed. Instead of the white hooded jacket he used to wear, he was now pure black body-fitted jacket with no hood. His gray cargo shorts were now replaced with white cargo shorts, with black stripes down the sides. He had his waist pouch attached behind him, and his kunai pouch on his right leg. Around his calves were black bandage wrappings, and flowed into black ninja sandals. All, in her words and eyes, he looked rather dashing. Ino-chan. Naruto looked at her expression with a risen eyebrow, and waved his hand to catch her attention. You okay? Naruto examined her attire and found that she really good. You look like one hell of a kunoichi, Ino-chan. Huh. Ino quickly shook her head, and sported a small blush. Really? She stood up and did a small spin. Daddy bought it for me, as a graduation present. Naruto smiled. Yeah, it looks great on you. He looked over at the clock, and felt a different kind of smile tug on his lips. Well, let's get going, wouldn't want to be late now, would we? With that they walked out the door onto their last day as academy students. As they walked through the streets they received several smiles, and waves. Even when they left the Yamanaka compound they were greeted with smiles and waves. Though there were the occasional glare sent his way, it was nowhere near as bad as it was when he was younger. It probably helped that his pranks didn't really affect any of them, but more of the people he knew who could take a joke, or the people who actually deserved it, even in the villagers' point of view. So what do you think the last exam will contain? Naruto asked as they walked. I would think it would be a jutsu test. They've been pushing it a lot lately. Ino stated as they walked, though I could see a taijutsu test, but I doubt it. Since those that do pass they don't want to wear us out before we go to our Jonin senseis. Naruto nodded. I agree. He glanced sideways at her. So how goes your taijutsu training? Ino smiled over at Naruto. It's going pretty good. I finally was able to stop the chain from wrapping around me or hitting me. Naruto chuckled. It's not funny. If you would have told me, I would have been able to fix it right away. That was the whole point. Naruto stated as they got closer to the academy. It took me forever to figure out how not to get myself killed by my own chain. So I had to let you figure it out, besides I'm sure your fix is different from my own. So I don't know if my method would have helped you or not. Ino merely huffed, puffing her cheeks. Leave it to you, make yourself the good guy and make look like I'm looking for a way out of hard work. Naruto laughed, and Ino joined in soon after. They walked into the academy doors, and into their classroom. Surprisingly enough, the majority of the class already here. So they took their seats towards the back of the classroom like they normally did. Ino decided to save her energy instead of contesting against Sakura or any other girl for the spot next to Sasuke. Sure, she wouldn't mind sitting there, but in the end it was just a seat. Though what they forgot to mention was all the heads they were turning. A lot of guys stared at Ino's figure, all the while the majority of girls looked Naruto figure. By no means had they truly matured yet, but it showed what they were going to have later on. Though the real kicker was that it even tore the eyes of Sasuke's fangirls away from him. Now Sasuke could care less about the girls, but it was merely the fact that Naruto was getting more than attention than he was. Though he didn't say anything, it was the last day of the year, and he wasn't going to cause trouble. Yo Kiba, you ready? Naruto asked, leaned against said person's desk. Hell yeah. Kiba thrust a fist in the air, and Akamaru barked, been waiting for this all year. Naruto chuckled and stuck out his fist. I'm with you on that one. They shared a fist and he turned his attention to Shino. How's the hive, Shino? Shino shifted his gaze over to Naruto and nodded in greeting. They are doing well, Naruto-san. I wish you luck on the test. Naruto grinned. Nothing to worry about. Ino on the other hand was talking to Choji. Hey Choji, you ready for today? Of course, Munch asterisk. I'm making sure I pass. If I do, my dad is taking me out for an all-you-can-eat buffet tonight. Choji grinned, digging right back into his ever-present bag of chips. Ino rolled her eyes. Of course that's your reasoning. Shaking her head, she saw Shikamaru enter the room with his usual lazy pace. Hey Shikamaru, you ready for today? Surprisingly, there was a slight grin on his face. Yeah, I made sure I did enough to pass, and not be considered dead last, anyway. I'm just ready for this to be over with. It's such a drag. He took his usual seat, and laid his head to rest upon his arms. Typical Nara. Before Ino could reply to her lazy friend, Iruka-sensei entered the room with his clipboard and called the class to attention. Yet when he entered, there was the lack of Mizuki-sensei. He explained the final exam would be over the clone jutsu, and a standard henge. Then he glared Naruto, who was smiling cheekily, while he explained that unfortunately Mizuki would not present for the exams due certain circumstances that involved orange paint, feathers, and glue. Now for some of the class this would be a walk in the park, but for those who came from civilian families, who decided not to practice chakra control, this was not going to end well for them. Iruka one by one called students in for their exams. The students who passed or failed were sent in two different directions. The ones who passed were sent to another classroom where they would get their Jonin-sensei team assignments, while the ones who failed would leave the academy and wait for the next school year or in most cases drop out. During this time Naruto waited patiently as his friends were called into the room. Finally Iruka-sensei came out and called his name, Naruto Uzumaki. Alright. Naruto grinned and followed Iruka into the room. Let me know when, Iruka-sensei. Iruka sat down behind his desk and looked up at Naruto with his strictly teacher face. Alright Naruto, 3 clones. Naruto made the hand sign and 3 clones poofed to life, as he liked to call it. Iruka nodded approvingly. Alright, now dispel 2, and do 2 different henges. One on you and the other clone. Naruto nodded, and did just that. Dispelling 2 of his clones, he hanged his clone as the 3rd Hokage, and then for Naruto he changed into the Yondaime. Iruka found it rather impressive that he could henge into the 4th, since all Naruto could go off as photos. Well done Naruto, I would like to say congratulations, you graduate. Alright. Naruto cheered, and the dispelled his clone and henge. He walked over to where the metal plates with the leaf symbol. Picking up a black cloth, he clasped the metal plate and tied it around his forehead. Now I'm one step closer. Iruka smiled at Naruto's enthusiasm. Okay Naruto, you'll get your team assignment shortly. It would seem one of the Jonin senseis knew you would pass, along with some others. I look forward to what you can accomplish. Now get out of here, I got other students to grade. Naruto grinned and bolted from the room. When he entered the room he found that were still a few civilians that got through, but for the most part it was clan kids. Naruto went and joined up with his friends, all showing off their brand new headbands, or some cases armbands, or even waistbands. This went on for a long while until that last few of the students came into the room. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, and the slowly falling in the horizon, Iruka came into the room with his clipboard in hand with a content smile on his face. Alright everyone, I have your team assignments right here. When I tell you your teams, you are free to leave. You'll meet with Jonin sensei here in this classroom tomorrow, at noon. With that said, Iruka focused his attention on the clipboard, and began calling out team numbers. Naruto listened tentatively for his name or his friends' names. Team 7 will be Kiba Inazaka, Sakura Haruno, and Sasuke Uchiha. He felt sorry for Kiba for being stuck with Sasuke, and Sakura on Team 7, but not much you can do when you're dead last of the class. They'll put you with you the two best. Yeah, Naruto was peeved that he didn't get the Rookie of the Year, but all in all it's just a title. The only reason, and the only reason, is because of the fact his affinity for Genjutsu is non-existent. Team 8 will be Hinata Hyuga, Naruto Uzumaki, and Ino Yamanaka.